All of our Generations United's information on some of the COVID-19 response is available at our website, which is www.gu.org, and then it's /COVID-19. And that you would be able to find any of these recordings as well as any other resources. Finally, so what we know is that intergenerational practitioners and facilitators are really some of the most creative people that I know, that there's always challenges with bringing the generations together, and there are just a multitude of ways that people have dealt with this over the years since we've been doing this. We do know that no one's really faced the severity of the challenges that we're facing right now because of stay-at-home orders and lockdown and having to do remote work. So we're really excited that today we're going to be able to highlight a couple of programs. Some presenters are going to share us about how they have adapted their work to effectively engage students and older adults remotely since the lockdown happened. And there's been some great lessons that we've learned over the past 6 months, and some ways that we can hopefully move forward and highlight some best practices and some ways that we can be effective in continuing to build intergenerational connections when we know they're more important now than ever. Following the presentations, we will have a time for question and answer and discussion, as well as some opportunities for a small group breakout so that we can have conversations in a smaller setting around some of these topics with some of the folks on the call. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Quinn Lockwood, who is the coordinator of youth and family volunteers at DOROT in New York City. So take it away, Quinn.
Great, thank you, Sheri, so much. Thank you also to everyone for being here, Generations United. Thank you for including us today. So as Sheri said, my name is Quinn Lockwood, coordinator of youth and family volunteers at DOROT. So DOROT is a social service agency located on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and we've been around working since the 1970s, and our agency primarily serves older adults in a wide variety of ways with lots of volunteers and different types of services. So our team and our department within DOROT is called the Department of Intergenerational Engagement. We focus on creating intergenerational connections between youth volunteers, so those are students who are 18 and younger, and connecting them with older adults. So today I'd really like to spend our time focusing on sharing some learnings from a specific program that we ran this summer. It's one of our signature intergenerational programs called our Summer Teen Internship. And this is an intensive volunteer experience that we run every summer. It's for high school students to interact and work directly with older adults 4 days a week, all day long. And so every day our teen interns are working with seniors in different workshops, classes, intergenerational discussion groups, spending time on the phone and interacting with them over Zoom in smaller groups as well. So we know that this program really runs in a specific way, and it has specific timelines and goals, but we did feel that after this summer, running everything virtually for the first time, we had some big picture takeaways and learnings that we thought could really be applied across a lot of different program settings. So we run a number of sessions, summer sessions, across different sites. And as we were thinking through the planning and the logistics of a virtual summer, we really wanted to be thoughtful about structuring these experiences in a way that would build community and really create a feeling of connectedness among all of our youth and older adult participants. So this really meant creating space for intergenerational relationships to form and blossom, as well as really giving all of our participants the sense and the feeling that a lot of their intergenerational connections that they were forming maybe on an individual basis in a class or on a one-on-one or two-on-one basis, we wanted to elevate that into the feeling of a collective experience. So anyone who was part of our DOROT Summer Teen Internship Program walked away with a sense that they were part of something much larger than themselves. So we have survey information from our teen and older adult participants that really told us this approach to creating a sense of community worked for us this summer. We also have teens and seniors from this program that are still in touch, requesting to maintain those relationships with each other beyond the length of the program. Some of our teen interns, have each other's social media. So those connections are still feeling really fresh, and like we've been able to maintain them. So what were some of the things that we did? And I'm going to talk a little bit now about how we actually thought about creating and forming that community. So we started out by looking at the goals of the Summer Teen Internship Program when it runs in person, and then determining how or if those goals could really translate across a virtual space. So we decided, to kind of go for it. We thought that our goals could still be achieved virtually. And there are some really important pieces that we think about when this program runs in person, specifically around creating a sense of community between our teen interns that we wanted to make sure we carried over into the remote environment. So a few of those important pieces were building in lots of meaningful leadership roles for teen interns to assume responsibility both in planning program, but also being able to lead their own intergenerational programs. We wanted to give them a sense of ownership over this experience, a feeling of investment and a lot of buy-in and excitement that really translated into how our teens showed up into every workshop and every program this summer. And you could see sort of their excitement and genuine desire for connection mirrored in the way that they interacted with our older adults. We also built in intentional cohort development time for our teens. So time in their schedule when they could get to know one another, sometimes with staff present, and sometimes, in breakout rooms, kind of more teen-driven time to connect. And we were actually, surprised at the end of the summer by the depth of the relationships that were formed between our teen interns and our older adults. At the beginning of the summer, we were not totally sure if that we were going to get that same feeling and those same outcomes as we know we do when this program runs in person. So we had a number of sort of broad learnings in terms of our structure. And one was that we really underestimated at the start how many of our older adults would really be able to put the time and the effort needed to get themselves onto Zoom. We relied super heavily on Zoom all summer. It was our main platform and the main way that we were having our participants connect. And we also, going in, knew that a lot of our particular seniors do have access to Wi-Fi and to computers and to that technology. And we also learned along the way how important it was to create opportunities pretty much using phone as an alternative to Zoom and the computer, as a way for those older adults that, the Zoom was really a big barrier, that they just weren't going to be able to join us for Zoom programs. So we had telephone programs available for those folks. And we also, in addition to making use of a lot of digital tools, which I can definitely talk more about in Q&A, like what some of the specific tools were that supported our virtual programs, we also found that timing really mattered a lot. So creating and building in time for participants to connect with one another sort of more informally. So that could mean opening our links to our Zoom meetings early and having people join and have sort of some informal socializing time. We also had facilitators of our workshops that had great success leaving their classes open a little bit longer for people to connect in that way afterwards, kind of the way that you would like get up and start to leave a room and say goodbye. We found that was important. And also the orientation and training specifically for our teen volunteers gave them strategies and tools to use in program, like what are some strategies to use in a different intergenerational setting. Maybe you're in a challenging situation with a senior who's upset, or, as we say, often very challenging times now, wanting to prepare teens to support older adults in those programs, when needed. But also the idea that having teens go through training and orientation all together as a group, kind of, they came out on the other side of that training with a feeling that as a teen intern at DOROT, they're really part of a team. And their fellow interns could serve as a resource. And of course, knowing that DOROT staff are there for them to serve as resources as well. And so speaking of time and the importance of time in any setting, especially a virtual setting, I can start wrapping up here. Just one or two other quick learnings that we came out with were the importance of real-time communication between our staff during Zoom programming, to assist an older adult who maybe was having trouble accessing the program, maybe a teen with Wi-Fi connectivity issues. Making use of group chat features was really key for us in having that real-time communication and troubleshooting going. So I think I can leave it there. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our learnings and ideas about creating virtual experiences and creating community over Zoom.
Thanks, Quinn. We always are so pleased with, and we often share DOROT's work, but DOROT is a program of distinction and an Eisner Prize recipient, so their intergenerational work is truly exceptional. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to turn it over now to Chloe Oliveras, who is the External Relations Director at Reading Partners in Los Angeles, to talk about how they've adapted their reading program with older volunteers in a virtual setting. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sheri, for passing it off. My name is Chloe. As she mentioned, I'm the External Relations Director here at Reading Partners Los Angeles. I'm so thrilled to be here and talk a little bit about the work that Reading Partners has been doing over the last 6 months to pivot to meet the needs of our schools during COVID-19. So I would be remiss to not talk a little bit about what Reading Partners typically looks like before I sort of pivot into what Reading Partners is doing now. So we are a literacy program. We work one-on-one with students who are struggling with reading, typically students who are somewhere between 6 months and 2.5 years behind grade level and in grades kindergarten through 4th. We partner directly with Title I elementary schools, adopt a space, convert it into a reading center, and then provide one-on-one tutoring with an ongoing volunteer. So we have one volunteer paired with one student for a semester or school year to build that relationship and to help get that student to grade level. So when in-person school suspension started in March of this year, we had to suspend programming for the safety of our students and our staff and our volunteers, and figure out how we go online. We were a very tangible program. We had physical curriculum and a physical space and physical people that were in our space and students coming in and out, and that's not going to be something that we're going to be able to do within the next probably at least 6 months. So we transferred our curriculum online. We spent the latter end of last school year putting all of our resources into an online format, making sure that all of our platforms worked and were compliant with any district or school requirements, and started to develop some new training. So we are incredibly fortunate. We left last school year with about 1,200 community volunteers who were working one-on-one with the student at least 1 hour a week. Of those volunteers, just a little shy of half are over the age of 50. So we are starting this year by onboarding all of our returning volunteers, so folks who have been with us prior to in-person school suspension, and we are training them on how to get online. So this process has been really interesting. We actually just started a couple of weeks ago with a 2-part 4-hour orientation process for all volunteers who have previously worked with Reading Partners. This has been really great. It's allowed us to talk a little bit about what it's going to be like to serve students in their home, and to do that through an anti-racist and multicultural lens for all of our volunteers. And then help everyone get up to speed with what this program is like. It looks and feels like Reading Partners. It uses a lot of the resources that our volunteers are very comfortable and familiar with, but they're online, and that's a little challenging. It was challenging for me when I did it for the first time. So we are providing a more individualized approach to making sure that we're meeting everybody's technological needs. We want to make sure everyone's comfortable and not stressed about what using Zoom is like and sharing your screen is like and clicking on things and moving around and engaging with your student, because we know that building relationships in a virtual space is hard. And it's going to be really hard if you're not super comfortable with the technology that you need to use to do that. So we're doing incredibly small group orientations with folks. After our orientation process, we are actually providing breakout groups depending on your comfortability with tech. We don't want to make any assumptions about folks and their experience using these platforms. Most people at this point have had a chance to video conference in some way or form over the last 6 months. And then doing some troubleshooting with folks, really providing individualized support to our volunteers, many of whom are older adults, to make sure that they feel comfortable, very similar to the way that we actually work with students. We're using the same model and the same pedagogy that we use to teach students things like phonics or author's message to get folks up to speed with how to connect with someone over the internet and what to do to troubleshoot if you're running into any issues. Once they start, we're actually going to be providing ongoing individualized support to our volunteers to make sure they maintain comfortability, or if they run into any issues, they're able to solve them with a staff member from Reading Partners by doing daily office hours on an ongoing basis throughout the day where people can log in or call us. We're happy to support them through that process as best as we can. We are also checking in with our volunteers. So the school space is full of rules, as it should be, in response to COVID-19, and with all of our schools that we work with here in LA being fully remote and virtual for at least the fall. So we are making sure that we log in with all of our volunteers to get them set up, making sure that everyone is ready to go, that their student is comfortable using the resources, and that any questions that we can ask before they start their tutoring session are answered. Because we're not physically in a space with them and they can't look up and ask us a question during their tutoring session, we're also bouncing in between our Zoom rooms throughout their tutoring sessions. We should at some point this year at least have 4 going at once, so we are able to sort of pop in for a couple of minutes each time. And we are also making sure that we touch base over the phone at least once a month with our volunteers as well to hear how things are going. How can we best support you? How does this feel for you as a volunteer? Because this is new for us too. This is something we had been planning to do for years, and COVID-19 just sort of put the accelerator on making sure that we got all of our resources online. And we couldn't be more thrilled with the way that our program looks and feels, and our school partners are just so excited to have this additional support that is completely tailored to each person's experience with it, both our volunteers and our students. I can also chat in the chat just a little bit more about what our program looks and feels like prior to COVID-19 and now.
Thank you, Chloe. I love, like, we're seeing some kind of already some themes about how folks are pivoting and adapting and sort of fast tracking some online work. We're going to turn it over now to Katherine Kim. She is our final presenter today. She's the Senior Communications Editor at the Koreatown Youth and Community Center. And she's going to share about how they sort of had to pivot and adapt their one of their intergenerational programs this summer.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you. Generations United and the Eisner Foundation. We've been receiving support from the Eisner Foundation for several years. KYCC is a multi-service organization in Los Angeles's Koreatown, and we are 45 years old, and we have been running intergenerational programs for a few years now, and most of them have been parent groups or engaging with our grandfamilies at our preschool kids town, or having elder volunteers come in and work with our youth programs for one-on-one tutoring. So that's what our programs have looked like. And this year I launched the Koreatown Storytelling Project, which was supposed to be a 6-month oral history, multimedia, and multi-ethnic digital media pilot program. And the program's goal was to teach the fundamentals of community journalism and storytelling to the youth, who were then going to be interviewing and engaging with the elders in our community to document the life experiences and the stories of our community members through primary source information. So really our goal changed in that our mission statement is the same, and then we added the words during the COVID-19 pandemic to the end of it, which really changed the focus of our of what we were looking to accomplish. So we were supposed to launch on March 17th. We ended up going into safer home at orders on March 13th. And so I knew that there was the possibility of this as we were recruiting, but we didn't have any confirmation until the Friday before the Tuesday that I was supposed to launch this program. So we had to pivot very quickly and ask ourselves, are we even going to be running this program? How are we going to recruit these elders? The elders are supposed to isolate and stay at home and quarantine. So how are we going to engage with them? At around the same time, KYCC has 209 units of affordable housing. And we were hearing from our elders in the affordable housing units that they were having food insecurity issues and that they were just having a hard time getting, remember the toilet paper, conundrum, like they couldn't get basic essential supplies. They couldn't go to the grocery store, even though they had the early senior hours for the elders to go, like from 6 to 7 a.m. or whatever it was. Many of our elders could not make it out because they were not close enough to a grocery store to walk there and get there safely. So KYCC launched an emergency hot meal and grocery and essential delivery program to many members of our affordable housing units, but with the need from the community, it actually expanded to many seniors outside the perimeters of our organization and even our neighborhood. And so we started delivering to these elders, and that's when we started to realize we need to hear from these elders. They're being isolated, and so I worked together with that hot meal delivery program and our affordable housing units building managers to get a list of all of the elders and meal delivery recipients. And then I had my youth call them. So we were dealing with a limited income monolingual community largely. So we did not have the technological advantages that other people had. These are communities that don't use an iPad. They don't really even know how to use FaceTime. They don't necessarily have iPhones. So we were just dealing with direct phone calling. So my youth, and at the same time, I was teaching the youth these community journalism skills. So for the first month for the youth, we had professional journalists come and teach them interviewing techniques. This is all over Zoom, which was new to all of us at that time. We had journalists from CNN, the Associated Press, the Korea Times, and then the students started asking for younger journalists. So we had someone from the Daily Trojan and from the Daily Bruin come in to talk to them about what it means to be a journalist. What are some interview techniques? And during this time, the youth were practicing with the hot meal delivery recipients, just asking them, what are your needs? How has your quarantine experience been? But this was also a way for us to break the ice, because about a month after they were doing these weekly phone calls, we then started outreaching to these elders. Hey, the youth who are calling you to find out about your meal delivery needs or what your essential needs are, we're doing an interview program and a storytelling program. Would you like to share your experiences with us? And so we were able to, in the end, get 25 participants in the program. We had 9 youth who were each matched with an elder. And then on top of that, I had the youth interview a community member. So we partnered with StoryCorps. StoryCorps launched a website called StoryCorps Connect. And StoryCorps is like an oral history storytelling national program. And once we saw StoryCorps Connect, they had a list of questions to ask pertaining specifically to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we had our youth both interview the elders on Koreatown, their thoughts on the community, some of their life experiences, as well as the COVID-19 experience. So we were able to document the elders' personal experiences, what it felt like to be quarantined, if they could relate it to any other historical moment in time. Like some of our elders had lived through the Korean War, so they have experienced some hardships that they could relate to. So another thing that we did to engage with them, because we couldn't meet with them directly, was through the list of essentials that they asked us for, like toothpaste or cat food, just some things that they needed. We compiled care packages and we hand delivered the care packages. And I had the youth handwrite notes to their elders. And so we were able to deliver these care packages that had a hot meal, groceries, a handwritten note. They also wanted to include a succulent, a potted plant. I had the youth kind of brainstorm. What do you think the elders would like? Somebody said brain teasers. So we put some puzzles in there for the elders. And we were able to, in the end, we're going to be able to distribute 3 individualized care packages to our elders on top of the 3 hot meals that they received weekly from March to the end of June. And now they're still receiving weekly grocery deliveries. So we were able to connect them with external resources, as well as engage them with our youth in these interview and life stories. And so I'm really excited. I shared our website that we'll be launching, as well as we're printing all of the interviews into book form. We are uploading it onto StoryCorps Connect for audio. We have created videos, and we have done photo essays and self-portraits. And there was also one moment where we were able to have the youth take portraits of their elders. So we met at the Affordable Housing Building with masks, gloves. We disinfected the camera each time, and our youth were able to interact and meet with their elder and give them their hot meal and care package personally. So that's just the way that we've been able to pivot, and looking forward to really growing this program and wanting to really understand how we can best integrate some technology. I would love to get iPads in the hands of our elders and really teach them how to use it. But I did find that the Generations United guide on physical distancing was really helpful, and that we did actually kind of get to incorporate like the oral history and the phone calls and care packages and handwritten letters. Like some of these suggestions were really helpful, and good to know that they're just some techniques that we should be using, as we are probably going to be here for another 6 months. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Katherine, Chloe, Quinn, for sharing. There's been a lot of conversation already happening in the chat. So even if you haven't been actively using it, it might be helpful to just review and see what's been shared. I've just been struck by, and again, it's not surprising, because I don't think that anyone would ever say that sort of putting coordinating an intergenerational program is easy, or that it's it seems like there's a lot of staff time that's been placed in providing sort of, I think there's the comments about real-time support, and that staff being trained to provide sort of that technical support, as well as the programmatic support about how do you sort of build relationships and connect with people, as well as how do you get on Zoom or schedule meetings or things like that. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to, or if that response has already been in chat and I missed it, but the idea about how do you staff these types of programs, does it seem more intensive than sort of the staffing kind of in a pre-COVID or a non-COVID environment? And what have you been doing to sort of be able to still facilitate those types of connections?
I can certainly speak to that, as I am in week 3 of training 20 AmeriCorps members to provide this support. So, I mean, it's definitely been a really interesting planning process for Reading Partners. We've been working with AmeriCorps for, I believe, about 12 years, and we have a really amazing cohort of folks every single year, but this year is obviously very different. I would say the oversight for a lot of the programming that we're doing is much more intensive, just to make sure everyone is safe in the online environment and feels comfortable and supported and is getting all of the resources they need as fast as possible. So we're definitely having to staff a lot more robustly. I'm also really trying to make sure that we are building community among those folks, so making, training them on how to build relationships with our volunteers who, I think isolation is a huge part of this experience for a lot of people, and making sure that they have this staff member at our organization who they know cares about them, is there to support them, and feels comfortable asking questions and requesting, tech support, or is able to sort of bounce ideas off of, especially when they're working with their student. I was going to add one more thing, but I lost it. It's escaped my brain.
I know it always does. I feel like I'm constantly experiencing that every day. Did someone email me earlier this week, or was that 2 months ago? So the idea, and I think there's been a number of conversations sort of happening in Zoom again, and this is what we've been hearing again around protecting safety, and that still being the primary concern for older adults and for the youth that are involved. And I think I've heard from each folk that if you're working with the school district that you're really trying to maintain what those policies are and adhere to the policies that the school district is setting forward. Is there other lessons or experiences or things that folks have done or tried? Have they had to establish new safety guidelines or any of that type of work in terms of moving from a remote environment? I know one program that we spoke with just said that they added sort of in the parental or the guardian permission forms, sort of some information around, that getting permission for their children to be participating remotely, and then also doing the screening process for the older adults, so just sort of adhering to that as well. So I don't know if anyone has any other kind of just lessons learned or ideas that they wanted to share. And again, share and chat as well if you've found anything that's been particularly helpful or useful for you.
Well, KYCC had to, when we launched our hot meal delivery program, that was a whole new world for us, because we were dealing with food handling, PPE. We had to really get masks and gloves together and create a protocol on not only how we were going to distribute the food safely, but how we were going to handle the food safely. Like, there's a lot of, you can't put the grocery bag on the ground. There are things that we needed to learn very quickly. So our volunteer coordinator really researched with our HR person, what the best practices are for safely working with the older population and with food.
Great. And then just one last question that I wanted to pose, and I know that DOROT has a strong history of doing a lot of programming over the phone. I think your University Without Walls is an entirely phone-based program. So one of the questions was for elders who only have the ability to use a phone call or mail, did any of these projects have any insights into that type of situation? Oh, and then there's actually a DOROT response. So I sort of jumped in, but I don't know, Quinn, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, for sure. As our department director, Perry Smilo, just put in the chat, a little bit more about our telephone calling program, but that was something that we were thinking about and exploring as we were wondering, we had some idea that maybe older adults that we work with regularly who had never used Zoom before. I think a couple other folks mentioned, training processes for getting older adults online and troubleshooting separate issues. So we're really fortunate at DOROT that we have a tech department that we can sort of rely on and use as a resource when we have older adults that are trying to connect to our youth programs and they're having some difficulties. And in the spring, we also explored with existing relationships that we had between seniors and teens who had met in person and actually visited one another in person. We tasked some of those teens who had a relationship with an older adult when there was interest on the part of the senior to learn more about how to use Zoom and maybe explore that as a piece of connectivity that they hadn't needed to rely on before. And then of course with that, we also learned that piece around before sort of thrusting a teen into that situation of training an older person how to use this technology. What training are we also providing to our teams themselves, not just assuming that because you're a high school student, you're really familiar with all the intricacies and the ins and outs of Zoom and how to register someone and get them online. So there were, separate sort of pieces there. that we looked at. And our telephone program definitely this summer came into play for older adults that wanted to connect with our high school students and but weren't able to access our Zoom programming. We set them up both with classes by phone, larger discussion-based classes, as well as individual sort of more mirroring the in-person friendly visits that had happened one-on-one or two-to-one. We translated those into telephone connections.
Thanks. That's great. I think, some of the other continue to get a number of questions, and I do want to have an opportunity for us to break out into our small group where we can have a little bit more of an informal conversation with a smaller group of folks on the call. But we'll continue to try to respond to the questions that were posed in chat as we're going to the breakout group. So what we're going to do now is sort of an opportunity. I often think of it as sort of it's a chance to kind of have a conversation with the people who might be sitting around your table if you're in a live face-to-face conference. So we're just going to have about 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes to have a little breakout or just have a chance to meet with each other, maybe just share your name, where you're from, and something that you've learned that might to think about starting in your own intergenerational program, ways that you might be able to connect remotely, or ideas or challenges that you have. We'll then come back here for sort of a wrap up. But in a couple minutes, Emily will start sort of just sending you all off into your magic little breakout rooms. And like I said, we'll continue to respond to the questions that came into the group chat as we're gone. So Emily, you can hit the magic button. All right, it looks like it's working. If folks choose to stay in the main waiting room, you'll get to see just Emily and I trying to respond to some of these comments that have come in.
I'm just making sure, Sheri, that nobody's in a room by themselves. It looks like,
Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording. All right, it looks like folks are starting to come back. This is always sort of an interesting experiment every time we do this. So thank you for participating, and hopefully you had a chance to meet a new colleague or possibly connect with an old friend. But we will just give this a couple minutes for folks to come back into the main Zoom room. Okay, it looks like we're filling back up. So again, welcome back. I hope that we know that there's always issues with the technology when we're trying to use it, and I think that's probably one lesson that we've all can learn is that are working on being patient and flexible, because it's always a challenge. To just also mention, if there's someone that you've spoken to that you'd like to talk more, we don't share emails, but feel free in the chat to send a private message and share your contact and ask them to get back to you. We will be, in addition to a recording of the content, we will be sharing the text from the chat as well as other resources. So that'll be we'll have that document available as well. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone who registered for today's call. That'll have the link and the other resources and information. It'll take a couple days to receive it, but feel free to contact us if you had any questions in the meantime. Again, you'll be able to access all of that information at the Generations United's website, which has our COVID-19 related materials on there. We posted all there. We also will share additional information through our weekly e-newsletter, which is called Generations This Week, which you can sign up for also on our website. And then I believe that if you wanted more information about the work that the Eisner Foundation is doing, Chelsea was going to share a link in chat, which she may have already done. Again, hard to keep on top of this robust chat that we've had today. Just wanted to let you know that this fall we will be updating our COVID resources and developing a fact sheet on intergenerational programs and COVID-19. So again, contacting me and I can put my email, or Emily can put my email, and my dog just came to visit the webinar. If you wanted to send me any sort of information about what you're doing or what types of information and resources that you might need, I'd be happy to have that, to get that information from you and share that. I just wanted to give a round of applause, either like through our video chat for our speakers today. I want to thank you, Quinn, Chloe, and Kim, for sharing the fantastic work that you're doing and inspiring us in ways that we can all do a little bit more build intergenerational connections remotely. I also want to thank Chelsea and the Eisner Foundation for coming to us with the idea of co-hosting this conversation. I think it was a great opportunity, and hopefully you found it useful. And then I want to thank you all for joining us and for your work that you're doing to build a better world for younger and older people in your communities. And with that, we will go ahead and sign off. So thank you again, and we'll be in touch soon.